This video covers the two most common versions of orientation, global and local. But what does that mean? Well, we've manipulated objects quite a bit now, either grabbing and moving them, rotating, or scaling them. So far, we've done all of these manipulations using Blender's default global orientation. We can begin to understand orientation by looking at our viewport. In the lower left corner, our orientation widget shows which way our object is oriented in 3D space. Our z-axis, blue, is pointing up, and our x and y-axes are perpendicular to each other, like creating the corner of a cube. Slightly to the right of that display widget, we can see where Blender is displaying our orientation, currently the default global. Note that if we go into front view, numpad 1, we can see our z-axis going vertically and our x-axis going horizontally. We don't see the y-axis because it's going toward and away from us perfectly. If we move back to our user perspective, we can see the y-axis come into view. Since this is a global orientation, it is unchanging. No matter how we manipulate an object, let's say we rotate it by hitting our R key, the orientation stays consistent with our entire 3D world. So if we then hit G to grab and X to lock our movement, our object will still follow that global orientation. Let's undo out of that for the sake of demonstration. Now let's look at our orientation tool, currently set to global. If we open that up, we can see a host of different orientation tools. But right now, we just want to become familiar with global and local. If we switch to local now, nothing appears to happen because our global and local orientation are aligned. Let's test changing that and learn some new hotkeys while we're at it. Leaving our orientation on global, let's hit R to rotate and Z to lock the axis. Note the line following the Z-axis that shows us how we're oriented. I'll turn our cube a bit and left-click to end the operation. We've just rotated our cube on the Z global axis. So if we change our orientation to local, we can see that Z remains unchanged, but X and Y have moved to follow the transform. Let's set that back to global so that we can learn our hotkeys. Now that our cube is turned, let's scale it a bit. If we hit S and Y to scale in global orientation, we get a transform that actually affects both the Y and X axes of our cube, which is not exactly what we want. Let's right-click to cancel the operation. Now, let's try again, this time hitting S and Y, but then hitting Y a second time. Note how our object's orientation jumps to local. Now if we scale, we get a transform only along the local y-axis of our object. This hotkey combination works for all axes and all transforms. Play around for a while, scaling, grabbing, and rotating in both global, whichever transform key plus whichever axis key, and local orientation, whichever transform key plus whichever axis key twice. And get used to this powerful tool. Once you have, rather than quizzing, we're going to do a test. And as this is a test, I've already created this scene and saved it. I will not be showing the movements along the way. Alright, either undo your transforms or simply start a new file. Let's change the scale of our cube in our Properties panel. Hotkey N, and change Y to 3 and Z to 0.2. Remember, do that in scale. Now we kind of have a plank. Alright, using G for grab and Y for axis, move your objects 3 units in the positive Y direction. Do you remember your hotkey for snapping? If not, be sure to go back and review. Then left click to end your operation. Now, hit R for rotation and Z for axis, and using snapping, turn your plank a negative 45 degrees. Hint, you can track the exact amount by using snapping and watching your rotation transform in your properties panel, the one with the hotkey N. Now, move the plank towards you 5 units on the x-axis using local orientation. And now rotate your plank on the y local axis 90 degrees positive. Lastly, tab into edit mode and select what is now the top face on your plank. We'll note that our orientations also work in edit mode. Select R for rotate, and once you've selected it, take a moment to note that you can also easily see your transforms in the lower left corner of the viewport as well. Let's rotate the face negative 20 degrees on the Z local axis. Alright, I will go ahead and fetch the scene that I created and pull it up here. Now, does your scene look like this? If so, congratulations, you nailed it all. If not, that's okay. Go back, review as needed, and then try the test again. There is no perfect, so practice makes gooder. I'll see you guys in the next video.